Something just exploded on the internet, and it is darker than anyone imagined. Taylor Swift's latest post might have quietly exposed the real reason Selena Gomez's friendship with Francia Raisa went up in flames, and y'all, it is not the story we were told. For weeks, people have painted Selena as the villain, cold, ungrateful, a friend who turned her back on the woman who literally gave her a second chance at life. But what if that was never the truth? What if the real monster in this story was jealousy disguised as friendship? Because now, it seems like Francia was not just envious, she was plotting. From subtle sabotage to public humiliation, the clues were there all along. And when Taylor stepped in, she brought the receipts. Every last one. The tension between Selena and Francia had been simmering beneath the surface for years. But it finally boiled over after Selena's secret Santa Barbara wedding, the event that should have been a fairy tale, but instead became the stage for a silent betrayal. Days before the ceremony, Francia appeared in an interview that instantly sent shockwaves across social media. When asked whether she would be attending Selena's wedding, her answer felt rehearsed, but her face told the real story. "I heard she was getting married," she said with that tight, polite smile, the kind of smile that hides anger under layers of sugar. There was no joy in her voice. No warmth. Just the cold sting of resentment barely masked by courtesy. Then, the interviewer brought up the one topic that always made the internet whisper, Selena's post-transplant lifestyle. The drinking, the smoking, the rumors. And in that instant, Francia's calm cracked. She fumbled, deflected, claimed ignorance, and then suddenly hinted at something more, "Maybe one day we will." That line, that single sentence, sent fans spiraling. Was it a warning? A threat? Or was Francia preparing to expose something only she knew? Fast forward to the wedding itself, an event glittering with Hollywood royalty. Taylor Swift, Ed Sheeran, Martin Short, even Paris Hilton. Everyone was there, except Francia. The same Francia who once gave Selena her kidney, absent. And within minutes, the internet went into chaos. Why wasn't she invited? Did Selena forget the woman who saved her life? The backlash was immediate. But then, like all internet mysteries, someone flipped the narrative. What if she was invited, and chose not to come? What if the wounds were not from betrayal, but from envy? Because the more people looked at that interview, the more it seemed like Francia was not heartbroken, she was angry. Not the kind of anger that comes from being excluded, but the kind that comes from watching someone else rise higher than you ever expected. And that night, while Selena danced surrounded by love and music, Francia was missing, but her silence spoke louder than any speech could. But here's where the story gets truly haunting, because this jealousy did not begin overnight. It had been quietly growing for years, hiding beneath posts of friendship and "love you forever" captions. The truth? Francia's resentment had been building since the surgery itself. Yes, she gave Selena a kidney, an act of selflessness that made headlines. But what most people do not realize is that Selena never asked her to. Francia volunteered. Out of love, maybe. Out of guilt, maybe not. Even she admitted that Selena had only broken down once, confessing her health struggles late one night. And Francia, emotional, impulsive, offered the organ without hesitation. But after the surgery, everything changed. Selena publicly thanked her, called her the most beautiful friend, her savior, her angel. The photo of them holding hands went viral. But somewhere behind that picture-perfect gratitude, something dark was forming. Because soon, the narrative shifted, and Francia was no longer seen as the hero. She was the side character in Selena's comeback story. And for someone who had given so much, being forgotten hurt more than any scar. By 2022, the cracks could no longer be hidden. When Selena's documentary My Mind and Me released, fans expected to see Francia celebrated. After all, her sacrifice was the foundation of that story. But to their shock, not a single mention. Not one word. And that silence spoke volumes. Francia's name had been erased from the chapter she believed she helped write. From that moment on, the dynamic shifted. Francia began liking shady posts, unfollowing Selena, and leaving cryptic comments that fans dissected for weeks. Meanwhile, Selena stayed quiet, until Taylor Swift subtly entered the picture, liking a post that hinted at betrayal, loyalty, and the painful cost of outgrowing people who secretly root for your downfall. And that, my friends, is when the internet realized, maybe Selena was never the ungrateful friend after all. So what really happened here? Was this a story of friendship lost to fame, or an act of kindness poisoned by ego? Maybe Selena and Francia both played their parts, maybe neither of them were innocent. But one thing is certain, when jealousy wears the mask of love, it never stays hidden for long. And as Taylor's post continues to blow up, the internet is once again divided, not over who gave the kidney, but over who truly gave up first. Around that same time, Selena Gomez did a casual Rolling Stone interview, nothing too serious, just her being open as always. But then she said something that sent an entire fandom into meltdown. She mentioned that Taylor Swift was her only friend in the industry. Just one line. One seemingly harmless sentence. But for Francia Raisa, the woman who had called her sister, the woman who had literally gone under the knife to save her life, that line hit like a dagger. Because let us not forget, Francia is in the industry. She is an actress, a public figure, and had been standing beside Selena for over a decade. And how did Francia respond? Not with grace. Not with a private message. But with one single, venom-laced word under a blog post, interesting. That was it. Just one word, but it was all it took to set the internet ablaze. Within minutes, fans went wild. Screenshots flooded Twitter. Memes exploded. Everyone could see the shade dripping off that one word. Francia deleted the comment, but it was far too late. The damage was done. The narrative was clear. She wanted the world to believe that Selena was ungrateful, that fame had changed her, that the sweet girl persona was just a mask. And then came the moment that broke the silence. Selena clapped back. Under a viral TikTok, she replied, "Sorry I did not mention every person I know." That single line confirmed what fans had been whispering for months, that behind the smiles and Instagram throwbacks, there had been real tension. Francia had not been the victim of abandonment. She had been quietly waging an emotional war, and now, it was all spilling into public view. A year later, the story got darker. Francia appeared in another interview, pretending like everything was fine, but her words betrayed her again. She claimed they had not spoken much in 6 years, and not at all in the last one. No beef, she said, just distance. But come on, you do not go from donating a kidney to radio silence unless something broke beyond repair. That is not distance. That is emotional fallout. That is resentment disguised as maturity. And when you line up the timeline, everything starts to look chillingly deliberate. The silence after the surgery. The public digs. The subtle guilt trips. Suddenly, this friendship does not look like a bond that faded, it looks like a relationship that collapsed under the unbearable weight of guilt, envy, and control. And guess who saw it first? Taylor Swift. Once Taylor got close to Selena again, she started noticing something that others had missed, the small, quiet manipulations Francia would make when Selena was around. A look here, a passive-aggressive joke there, subtle digs disguised as concern. Taylor, for the longest time, stayed silent. She watched. She listened. She observed how Francia's so-called support always came with invisible strings attached. But after that shady interview Francia gave, just days before Selena's wedding, Taylor had enough. Now, Taylor is not known for blasting people online. Her power moves are always quiet, precise, and devastatingly effective. And according to sources close to her circle, she had been warning Selena for a while, quietly pointing out patterns, showing her the signs of manipulation. But when Francia crossed the line again, Taylor did something that no one saw coming. She allegedly compiled everything. Every message. Every deleted post. Every private video Francia thought the world would never see. She packaged it all, a full document of receipts, and sent it to Selena. When Selena opened it, it was like watching her friendship unravel in real time. Screenshots. Texts. Old clips. Secret recordings. Francia saying things she could never take back. Things she never thought anyone would find. Taylor laid it all bare, and that was the end. Whatever fragile thread still tied Selena and Francia together, snapped. You would think that after all that exposure, Francia would step back, reflect, maybe even apologize. But instead, she doubled down. She started posting cryptic videos, one of them claiming that Selena's fans were bullying her. But when people asked for proof, there was none. Just vague gestures, emotional tone, no actual evidence. And the irony? The internet had already seen the opposite. Comment sections were overflowing with sympathy for Francia, calling her selfless, brave, a hero. While Selena, as always, took the hits quietly. But then people started to look closer. They started noticing how calculated Francia's hurt seemed. How her public sadness came right after every major Selena milestone. How she spoke about being bullied whenever Selena's career soared higher. And the more fans connected the dots, the clearer it became, this was not pain. It was control. Here is the twisted truth, Francia's act of generosity had somehow transformed into a lifelong emotional debt. Every time Selena tried to move forward, Francia pulled her back, like a chain made of guilt and memory. And sure, no one is denying that donating a kidney is life-changing. It was heroic. But heroism does not mean ownership. Once that surgery was done, Selena owed her gratitude, not her freedom. Francia's expectations became unbearable, almost like she wanted to keep Selena's life on a leash. And the hypocrisy? It is staggering. Because guess who took Selena to Napa Valley for her birthday? Francia. Wine country. A place built on vineyards, celebrations, and toasts. She literally planned a trip surrounded by wine, poured the glass herself, and then turned around and judged Selena for drinking it. That is not friendship. That is manipulation wearing a halo. What we are seeing now is the slow disintegration of a bond that once looked unbreakable. Francia's interviews are no longer about forgiveness, they are about reminders. Subtle little stabs, veiled as reflections. Meanwhile, Selena remains calm, releasing music about healing, about peace, about moving on. And perhaps that is what hurts Francia the most, watching someone she once had power over rise above it all. Because deep down, maybe it was never about the kidney. Maybe it was about control, the need to stay relevant, to stay needed, to stay remembered. But in the end, Taylor was right. Jealousy does not always scream, sometimes it smiles, posts, deletes, and pretends it is concern. And when you strip away the fame, the filters, and the photo ops, what you are left with is the oldest tragedy in the book, a friendship destroyed not by betrayal, but by ownership masquerading as love. And sure, people defend Francia. They say maybe she was just being protective. Maybe she was scared, terrified even, that Selena might relapse, that the sickness might return, that the girl she saved could slip back into danger. And maybe, at first, that was true. But there is a razor-thin line between care and control, and somewhere along the way, Francia stepped right over it. Because constant reminders of what you have done for someone are not compassion. They are chains. It is like saying, you owe me your behavior. And that is a cruel weight to put on someone who has already been fighting to stay alive, to stay sane, to stay free. But what makes this whole story even darker, is how Francia has been playing with the public narrative. One moment she says she does not want to be known as the kidney donor. She wants peace, privacy, a quiet life away from gossip. But then, like clockwork, she reappears in another interview, dropping subtle daggers wrapped in vague statements. I just wish certain people valued true friendship. She never names names. She does not have to. Everyone knows exactly who she is talking about. It is a cycle, hide, hint, retreat, repeat. She does not reject the spotlight, she manipulates it. It is not staying out of drama, it is controlling the drama. Because when you say, I do not want to talk about it, but somehow you always do, it starts to look less like peace and more like strategy. And the irony? The more she tries to look like the saint, the more cracks show in the halo. Fans are not blind. They see the contradictions. They hear the bitterness buried under forgiveness. They notice how her tone changes every time Selena breathes without her permission. What is tragic about this is how pure it all started. Two women, young, vulnerable, bonded by pain and survival. Francia's act was monumental, she gave something no one could ever repay. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being an act of love, and started feeling like a lifelong contract. Because every time Selena celebrates another birthday, posts a photo with her other friends, or simply mentions Taylor Swift, suddenly, the kidney story resurfaces like a ghost that refuses to rest. Old interviews reappear. Fan edits flood TikTok. Francia's name trends again, and somehow, the friendship that once stood for loyalty and sacrifice becomes clickbait. And speaking of Taylor, she was not staying silent either. Taylor saw what was happening. She watched the patterns, the guilt trips, the quiet manipulation that Selena had normalized. Taylor has always been fiercely protective of her inner circle, especially Selena. Behind the scenes, she is the one who steps in when lines get crossed. She calls things for what they are, no filters, no sugarcoating. So when she noticed how Francia's so-called concern started looking more like possession, she made her stance clear. Because let us be honest, when your friend starts monitoring your social media like an investigator, questioning who you hang out with, or getting upset when you do not text back fast enough, that is not love. That is surveillance. At some point, Francia stopped being the friend who saved Selena, and started acting like the friend who wanted to own her. Here is the brutal truth no one wants to say out loud. When someone builds their entire identity around being the one who helped, they panic when that identity is no longer needed. Francia had built her self-worth around being the savior, the healer, the one who mattered most. But as Selena grew stronger, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, that dynamic crumbled. Suddenly, Francia was no longer the hero. She was just a friend. And for someone addicted to validation, just a friend feels like invisibility. So she fought it. Not openly, but subtly. Through shade, interviews, and guilt. Because when control starts slipping, manipulation becomes the last resort. And that is the saddest part of all. What was once a sisterhood has turned into a public performance. Every unfollow becomes a headline. Every vague comment turns into a global debate. Fans play detectives, piecing together clues from interviews, captions, and likes. Did Selena shade Francia? Did Francia subtweet Selena? Every moment becomes another episode in a saga that refuses to end. What once was private and sacred is now consumed for entertainment. The world is watching two women who once shared tears, pain, and life itself, now communicating through silence and screenshots. It is not just ugly, it is tragic. And yet, through all this, Selena has never stooped low. She has never mocked Francia. Never leaked messages. Never gone live to expose her. Instead, she chose silence, and silence, when it comes from someone who used to overshare, is louder than any rant. Because silence drives those who crave attention insane. Francia wanted a public apology, public recognition, public gratitude. But Selena? She has outgrown the need to perform friendship. And that is the real heartbreak here, not the betrayal, not the jealousy, but the realization that sometimes the people who once saved you cannot walk beside you forever. Growth makes certain bonds impossible to sustain. Selena has evolved. She is no longer that fragile girl on hospital floors, crying for a lifeline. She is a survivor. A woman who has rebuilt herself from the ruins of disease, heartbreak, and global scrutiny. And maybe that is what Francia cannot handle, that the version of Selena who needed her no longer exists. The bitterness Francia carries, it is not subtle anymore. You can hear it in her voice. Every interview trembles somewhere between disappointment and self-praise. She will say, "I did it because I love her," but then, like clockwork, she adds, "I just wish she would be more responsible." That is not unconditional love, that is love with a rulebook. And in those moments, when the compassion fades and the control slips through, you can hear the resentment seeping out from behind every word. Because here is the uncomfortable truth: some people cannot stand watching you heal without them. Watching you smile again without their permission. Watching you move on when your happiness used to depend on them. Francia keeps clinging to the past, replaying that hospital scene in her mind like a movie she refuses to turn off. The tubes, the tears, the gratitude. But life is not meant to be lived on replay. Selena has already said thank you, over and over, publicly and privately. She has honored that sacrifice on stages, in documentaries, in interviews. What more can she give? Is she supposed to wear a sign around her neck that says, "Eternal debtor"? Imagine the exhaustion, the emotional labor of constantly proving your gratitude. Smiling carefully so no one calls you ungrateful. Editing your joy so it does not offend someone who once helped you. That is not friendship. That is emotional captivity disguised as loyalty. And maybe that is why Selena started to pull away. Because she realized gratitude had turned into a leash. No matter how softly she walked, she could not move without tugging on it. And when she finally broke free, when she chose peace over guilt, the leash snapped. But the internet never lets go. Every time Selena breathes, laughs, or posts something joyful, someone resurrects the ghost. The kidney. That one act that will not die. It follows her through every success, like a shadow chained to her name. And that is the tragedy, both of them are trapped. Francia in resentment. Selena in guilt. But only one of them seems desperate to escape. This could have been the most beautiful story, two women forever bound by an act of love. A story of sisterhood strong.